And welcome into a Tuesday edition of the Backstage Pass, always live and in living color here on our YouTube channel, the Backstage Pass, and of course on Facebook at the tag Backstage Pass 409. Countdown underway. CRS 2022 will be there. Nashville, Tennessee. Yours truly, Jeff McMahon, Kirsty Krause at the Omni Hotel. Big slate of guests coming up. Shenandoah is going to join us. Craig Campbell, Jesse G, Dallas Remington, and a whole lot more coming up there over that week. And then, of course, doing some things all over the city, I could imagine, too. Jeff, good to have you back here, and just pleased to welcome in. He's the host of the French Connection podcast and the founding member of the great rock and roll band Twisted Sister, JJ French on the show. JJ, how's it going, man?
Oh, you know what? It's not snowing. It's not raining. It's just cold. I'll take it. Not terribly cold. Cold, just cold enough. You guys are cold right now.
A little bit.
It's just when I hear you guys from Texas or you guys from California telling me, oh, yeah, it's like, 45 degrees and it's like, 10 here. I don't really want to hear it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I really am not looking for it. But my wife happens to be in Dallas right now, or Austin, I think.
Yeah.
Today, visiting a friend. So I love visiting down there. I did a couple of motivational speaking gigs in Austin, as a matter of fact, last year. It's a great town. So anyway.
I'll tell you, man, well, lots to talk about, lots to dive into. Do want to talk about definitely that new EP that was put out last year, The Feel Appeal, man. I love that. Love is for Suckers Extra, which is out there on digital platforms. So I tell you, a lot of people, and the first question kind of out of the box, man, is a lot of artists tell us here on the show they kind of had to do some different things, reinvent themselves during this whole pandemic, which I guess we're still under the umbrella now. But anything different for you? I mean, obviously the podcast, which is great out there that people can listen to, but anything different during the pandemic that JJ French had to do, or I guess Twisted Sister?
Well, my book is out, and that's the big thing. You can kind of see, right, there's a twisted business. So that book took about 5 years to write. And during the pandemic, my co-author and I had a lot of time to work on it. So I was excited. Twisted, our timing is both interestingly good and interestingly bad. I mean, but the interestingly good part of our timing is that when we stopped playing in '88, that was before the whole hairband thing cratered when grunge came. And, it cratered in one day. Smells Like Teen Spirit came out and it wiped out the dinosaur.
Right.
But we were already gone. So we didn't have to suffer the indignity of all of a sudden having no gigs like White Lion and, Whitesnake and
Cinderella,
Skid Row, like all of it just cratered. Motley Crue, it cratered in one day. I mean, it cratered so spectacularly that I remember Vito Bratta from White Lion, who was a good friend of mine. I called him and I said, how's it going? He goes, dude, I heard Smells Like Teen Spirit and stopped playing guitar for 9 months. I just stopped playing. I said, what am I wasting my time for? That was it. So anyway, so we stopped we stopped years before that. So we didn't have to suffer the indignity, although I had my own indignity. I mean, the band broke up. I describe it in the book. There was lawsuits. There were reasons why. It's in the book. I filed for bankruptcy. I lost everything. I went through a divorce, and I started working to make money in a pool hall overnight, being JJ French, the famous JJ French, except I needed money. So my friend owned a pool hall, and he said, you can manage it, and you can tell people you own it. So in case they ask you why you're here, you can tell them you own it, but you don't. But okay. Then I worked in a stereo store for years. Before I discovered Seven Dust, I brought my career back. But when I say about timing, what's interesting is that Twisted Sister, gets back together in 2003 and has an amazing 14-year run.
Right.
Headlining the biggest festivals in the world, like coming back in a manner that we never expected we could come back at. Bigger than ever, sold more records than ever, had the Christmas record that was gigantic. Didn't expect that to be a hit. We kind of did it as kind of like a goofy thought, like who's going to buy a Christmas album by a bunch of Jewish guys from New York who's in a heavy metal band? And bingo, Twisted Christmas was a hit.
Right.
We're on national television shows, we're on the Tonight Show and Craig Ferguson and, everything just flipped on its head. We wound up starring in the Twisted Christmas Review in Vegas, a week on the Strip. I mean, it was really an insane time. And that all went. And then in 2015, our drummer died. And And then I realized that in 2016, it was the 40th anniversary of me, Dee, and my guitar player, Eddie. So we called it 40. And can I use profanity? I don't know. Can you curse on this thing? Not curse? Do you use profanity on this or not?
I'm good with whatever. It's your show.
Well, the tour was called 40 and Fuck It tour. Okay, I was calling.
There you go.
It's 40 and Fuck It, And then we retire in 2016. So now 2019 comes and the pandemic hits, right? And all of a sudden, all of our friends are out of work. Every band we know is not working. Every roadie we know is not working.
Right.
Every crew person is not working. I'm sure you guys know dozens of these people personally. Sure. Well, we've been playing with these people for the last, 14 years. We're on the circuit with everybody. ZZ Top and Iron Maiden and Whitesnake and Motorhead and just on and on and on and on, Kiss and everything. And all of a sudden, they're all out of work, but we're not out of work because we stopped working. So we shifted over our business model, which I talk about in the book, because reinvention is really what my book is about.
Right.
The twisted method of reinvention. The book is a bizwar. It's a memoir and a business book. The business part of the book is the transitionary stages that a business has to go through to survive. And it doesn't matter if it's rock. It doesn't matter if it's a shoe company, a steel company, a makeup. It doesn't matter what it is. It's business practices. So we transitioned from a live rock act in 2016 and really focused on our licensing, because our music, we're not going to take in I Want to Rock are the most licensed songs in heavy metal. I mean, they're in every movie, TV show, commercial, to the point where you all may be sick of it, but we're not.
Sure.
So all of a sudden, Facebook is paying $1 jillion to have I Want to Rock. It's the Super Bowl commercial during the 2 years ago. It was like the main Super Bowl commercial in the last 2 minutes of that crazy game. How many people were watching that game at that moment? I mean, oh my God, like you couldn't have picked a better position to put that song in. And, and this year, Rachel Ray licensed, we're not going to take it for her, pet food line. I don't really care. The point being is we focused on licensing. So if licensing can bring in a lot of money, then I don't need to go play live. So here again, when you ask me that question about this, I understand that it was a really tough period for a lot of artists, but we already transitioned out into this other business, which was pushing our licensing. And Twisted Sister is fortunate enough to have 2 songs that just seem to be used everywhere, and not just here.
Well, and to that, is what kind of interesting, because I was looking up, just because having been on tour, I recognize the difference between the song that impacts your career and the song that might have hit a #1 on a chart. A lot of people will assume that this song that resonated with them so much was a #1 song. And, and I was looking, I want to say We're Not Gonna Take It went 21, right? In 83, 84, something like that. 84. And I looked it up just out of curiosity. This is very unscientific, but to show the kind of mark that you guys made while you were at 21, John Waite was with Missing You at #1, and you have twice the Spotify activity today as that song. It just shows that that you guys, that it's not all about that #1 record. It is about the spirit of the band. It is about how those songs resonate and permeate, which is why you've got licensing opportunities, because people connect to that stuff, right?
Yes. It's also the intangibles of the popular music culture. It's impossible to know. Look, I could tell you that everything about the band, good and bad, was scrupulously analyzed and done deliberately to create the myth that is the band 50 years later.
Right.
And that would just be bullshit.
Sure.
I can tell you that we're smart. I can tell you that we have vision. I can tell you that Dee is a creative monster and I'm a business guy, and that the combination of both of those things are the engine that drove it.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
And we had our issues because of that. But there are forces that sometimes are bigger than anybody could even imagine. I mean, look, if you look at the Beatles' history, the Beatles broke in America not because of the record label putting all the money behind it, because some 7-year-old girl told a disc jockey in Washington, D.C. to play the record. You know the story, right? It's a famous story. It's not like hyperbola. It's a famous story. You know, they tried to break these records. They tried to twist and shout. They tried Please Please Me. They tried She Loves You, and it was all brick wall. Nothing was happening. And the record label was like, man, you know, well, we had first refusal. Give it to Swan, give it to Tolly, give it to VJ. We can't get it done. And what happens? Two things happen. Ed Sullivan is flying back from France to the United States, and he's in Heathrow, and he sees all these girls screaming. He says to his friend, what's that? He goes, oh, it's the Beatles, the biggest band in the world, you know. And he goes, I don't even know who they are. And he says, I'm going to stay here for a couple of days, find out who they are, and bring them to America. That was one. Mm-hmm. Number two, some business guy comes back from England, brings a 7-year-old daughter, the single, I Want to Hold Your Hand. She goes crazy, of course. She calls a radio station in Washington, WWDC, whatever. The DJ picks up the phone, because in those days, that's what they do. You know, you must have the song. I have never heard of the band. You have to have it. I know you have it. Well, of course they had it, because Capitol did agree that they were finally going to do something with it.
Right.
He puts it on. Boom. Everything goes to hell. Where is that ever designed at a record label? Okay, I mean, that's an example.
Sure.
Michael Jackson moonwalks on the 25th anniversary of Motown. That wasn't supposed to be the difference, the catalyst that made Thriller what it was.
Right.
Okay. And here we have, we're not going to take it. So let's think about this for a minute, guys. You guys are old enough to know what I'm about to say is true. You go back to 1973 and you look at the biggest bands that were put together in 73 for the purpose of this example.
Yeah. Right.
Aerosmith, Judas Priest, AC/DC, Kiss, Twisted Sister, all start in 73.
Yeah.
We're all 20 years old, 20, 21. And we all had nothing, right? Nothing. You walk up to any one of us and go, hey, man, you think you're going to have a big career? If you do, how long is it going to last? You know the answer would be 5 years. That's what we'd say. We'd say 5 years. Maybe we would have said 10, only because the Beatles had lasted 10. But we never, ever, ever in a million years, for all the money in China, would have ever said 50 years. There's no way we would answer that 50 years. Okay, so here we are 50 years later. Kiss, Judas Priest, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Twisted Sister. Now, just to show you how much of a realist I am, Kiss is a bigger record seller than Twisted, for sure. And so is Aerosmith. And Priest were probably tied with. AC/DC for sure, bigger. However, you ask a 10-year-old kid in America to sing you a Kiss song, an AC/DC song, a Judas Priest song, an Aerosmith song, he's not going to sing it. You start singing, we're not going to take it. And that 10-year-old kid is singing, we're not going to take it. Right. And the reason why that kid is singing, we're not going to take it, is because 30 years ago, it occurred to me that if the band was going to have a future, it was going to have a future in music licensing. And the reason why that came to me, which I describe in the book, I hope I'm not going on too long, but this is good. You're good. For you guys to understand.
Yeah.
Just prior to my bankruptcy hearing, I was in England visiting the parents of my future second wife.
This is the name retention, right?
Oh yes, that's exactly
right. Yeah.
And I'm sitting there watching a television commercial, you know, on British TV, and it's Stand By Me. It's a Tide detergent commercial. And the song Stand By Me is being used. You know, it's typical. We take for granted there's music in commercials these days, right?
Right.
But this was something I hadn't really seen before. So some sexy British guy takes his shirt off, he throws it into a washing machine, and he throws Tide detergent, some hot girls. Oh my God, I'm watching this thing going, that song has nothing to do with this, but whatever. Look at that. And England being weird. The song goes back up to number one, the original song from 1961.
Right.
This is now 1989. Okay.
Yeah.
1989. There's no reason in the world why a C, A minor, F, and G doo-wop track, as great as Stand By Me is,
Right.
and it's a great song, okay? It's great. There's no reason why an original song from 1961 should go to number one.
Right.
Except this stupid freaking commercial.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, whoa, that's pretty freaking amazing. And lo and behold, I'm in bankruptcy court 6 months later with the indignity of bankruptcy, where I'm losing everything. And all I have is the trademark of Twisted Sister. And the judge looks at me and he says, well, the only real asset you have, because I was going through a divorce on top of everything else, so you couldn't ask for a worse combination of stuff.
Right.
His name Twisted Sister, and I should take that from you and give it to one of your creditors because you owe a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at the judge. I said, Your Honor, you could do that, but it's worthless. And he goes, what do you mean it's worthless? I said, do you know anything about pop culture? You're only as good as you are today. We're yesterday's news. Nobody cares about Twisted Sister. And in truth, nobody cared about Twisted. Nobody cared. We're over. Done.
At that time.
At that moment, you're deader than dead, like deader than dead. And I said to him, but my quote was, I said, but maybe in 10 years, Tide Detergent will come to us and want to use a song. And if they do, maybe I can convince them to do one of our songs. We're not going to take it. And if they do that, maybe the song becomes a hit. And if that happens, maybe I'll be remarried. And if that happens, maybe I'll have a kid. And if that happens, maybe I'll need money to send the kid to college. And if that happens, maybe I could put the band back together. That's why I should hold on to the name.
Sure.
He looked at me and he went, wow, that's a pretty convincing argument.
Yeah.
You can keep the name. Bottom line, 10 years to the day of that statement to that judge. So now it's 1999. Comtrex nasal spray, licensed. We're not going to take it for $100,000.
Wow.
That was the first license that we got. And then eventually in 2004, we re-recorded all of our songs. And what we did was we were able to sell our masters to keep even more of the money. So at that point, we realized you need people to cover your music.
Right.
You need it. And Dee and I have spoken about this a lot. We say to ourselves, you know, so many people are hung up on how much money you make on an individual license. And I'm not going to waste the time of your listeners to get into the minutia of licensing. But I will say this, putting aside that when you license a song for any reason, it's a menu, the length of time, who's doing it, where it's going to be played, and so on and so forth. If you calculate all of those variables against the usage and who's listening, and you say to yourself, I would rather have X amount of people hearing that song in the air than not hearing that song in the air, when I know that every year another 5 million songs get dumped onto the public, what do I have to benefit from? I need to keep that music in the public consciousness.
Yeah.
So we do everything we can, especially to keep We're Not Going to Take It and I Want to Rock in the public consciousness. Now, to that end, as an example, guy running for president of Ecuador 2 months ago, someone sent me a video. He's doing We're Not Going to Take, he's singing We're Not Going to Take and using it for a commercial. I'm not going to get into the legality of it. That's not the point of this example. The point of this example is the worldwide breadth of the song. Someone sends me a video, president of Spain, 30,000 people in an arena singing We're Not Going to Take It for whatever reason, good, bad, or whatever. Again, I'm not going to get into the politics of it. Just talking about the actual use. 30,000 people in Spain on a Saturday night are singing We're Not Going to Take It. On the steps of Brexit at Parliament in England when Brexit was being negotiated.
Sure.
We're not going to Brexit. Truckers in Canada, because of this vaccine strike that's going on, they're using We're Not Going to Take It. Again, I'm not going to get into the politics of it. What I'm getting into is the understanding that it has become possibly the world's greatest song that represents the disenfranchisement of people, and no one could have predicted it.
Sure.
So Brandon, to your point, I couldn't have predicted it 30 years ago that that song was going to be representative of that kind of emotional feel. But because it has become, you have to look at this. We're Not Going to Take It's the greatest protest song ever written, and I Want to Rock is one of the greatest party songs ever written. So we get it on both sides, right? So that's why So when you ask me, how's the transition, how's COVID dealing with you?
Yeah.
I think I kind of answered your question in a way.
You did.
Well, let me ask you this in the context of COVID, because I've heard you already had the book started. The book was already going before all of that. So you finished it during that window. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that right? So I've heard you were not only the guitar player, but you managed Twisted Sister for the bulk of that time. And I've been on the road. I completely understand you can't anticipate things, and a lot of times you understand what worked or what didn't in retrospect. You're able to reverse engineer, look back, see what was going on before and kind of go, oh, that's why that worked. Or I actually knew what I was doing in that moment. Did some of this time off, is that part of the way that you were able to kind of look back and say, oh, here's what I actually know that contributes not only to the success of the band, but also contributes to a broader success. So I have knowledge that Inc.com would care about, or gives you a frame. I've heard you say there's three kinds of people. There's people that make it happen, people that watch it happen, and people that look back and say, what happened? I'm wondering if some of this time as you finished the book and could focus on it kind of gave you an additional lens to understand what you actually did from a business perspective.
What the time did was allow me to figure out talking points to make people remember, to come up with the twisted method, which is an easy, digestible concept.
Right.
If you think about Tony Robbins or any of the other speakers you may go see, they stand up and they sell you some shtick. They do a shtick. They tell you why their view is the reason why you should follow these rules. And sometimes they're complicated. Sometimes the PowerPoint is overwhelming. And I said, you know what? I'm going to simplify this shit. And one day I was going out for a walk, which I do all the time. And here's what it was. There was a book called Grit that came out about 2 years ago. And the thesis or the concept behind Grit was that this was the single most important element to the difference between you being successful or you not being successful. It's grit. Like the whole book is about, and it was a professor who wrote it, this woman, Angela Duckworth, I think, and she got all this publicity for writing this book, Grit. And I'm watching her going, well, okay, I have grit, but there's a lot of other things that went into it. Not just grit. And not only that, but not everybody who's super successful needs grit. If you happen to be with someone who has it, you can go on the coattails of it. So it's not necessarily. So I started putting words down on paper, what I thought it meant to be successful. And this is while the book is being written. This is when we were trying to figure out if it's is it a memoir or is it a business book? Which one is it? Everyone's asking me, which one is it? And I felt like that scene in Chinatown on my sister, on my mother, on my sister. There's a scene at the end of Chinatown where she goes, which are you? What am I? Is it a business book? Is it a memoir? Is it a business book? So two things happened in one of those walks. One was, it's a bizwar. I'm coming up with a new word. Make my publicist really happy. A brand new word. JJ just marketing. The other one was I put this word, I put tenacity, I put excellence, I put discipline, all this other stuff. And I started looking at the word and the anagrams, and I realized, oh my God, I can make it the word twisted and everybody will remember that. So it's the twisted method of reinvention: tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, and discipline. What I was able to do then is, because I kept diaries for so many years, I was able to go back to the diaries and I was able to pull out examples of why every one of those is important. So if you look at the twisted method of reinvention, I don't care what business that is. The same principles of success: tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, discipline. Tell me what company doesn't follow those. Tell me one successful business that doesn't follow them. They all follow it. Every single one of them follows that, and so I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what is an entrepreneur? I mean, that's my audience, is entrepreneurs. There's there's three reasons why you become an entrepreneur. The third reason, though, is very different from the other two. The other two comprise 99% of the reasons. The third reason is, let's say you just want to save the planet or save the whales or something, and that's a wholly different side of it. But basically, what an entrepreneur is one of two things. An entrepreneur either wants to show the world something that the world has never seen before, and they're willing to risk everything in their power to show this to the world. They're willing to risk their marriages, their relationships, their money, everything. Or they're willing to take an existing model and improve it because somebody needs an improved version of that model. That's it. Those are the two things that embody entrepreneurs. There's something brand new no one's seen, or an improvement that's so good. Well, I'm a musician. There's plenty of bands before Twisted Sister. So obviously I'm not inventing something that hasn't been invented, but am I improving something that existed? So the idea behind Twisted Sister was to improve an existing model. And that existing model was the New York Dolls, who had some really strong attributes and some really big problems. Their strong attributes were they had a great image at the right time. The bad thing was they were awful.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. They were just terrible. And if the Dolls didn't look as good as they did, if the Dolls were a garage band, they would have been laughed out of the room because they were terrible. People don't want to talk about that. They want to raise them to some higher level of something. And that's fine. That's fine. You can do that all you want, except I'm a New York guy. I grew up with all those guys. I know what a band is. I know what they can do. I knew Johnny, and I know, they used to rehearse in a room down the hallway from a band that I used to play in. So I know these guys. When they came out as the Dolls, wow. So I wanted to improve an existing model. And I remember to be truthful to myself and to you, and in the book, I saw the Dolls many times. And one night I went to see them, and I was stopped by what I thought was a record company executive in the hallway. And he said to me, you just come from the show? And I said, yeah. And I said, what did you think of him? So I'm thinking he's probably wants to sign the band, and he wants to get an opinion. Here I am, a 21-year-old guy, glitter, my hair's all frosted and chopped up like Mick Ronson, and I'm looking exactly the way I should be looking in 1973 or 72. And I said, my quote was, I said, they look amazing, but they really suck. If they ever learn how to play, you could probably make a lot of money. That was my quote. Okay. So that's what I said. So bottom line was, the idea was to put together a band that could actually play. And hence Twisted Sister was born from that. So that was really it. So what the time to answer your question about it, this allowed me to probably finally put the finishing touches on the concept behind the book and the direction that my motivational speaking business would take, because I'd done a lot of motivational speaking, but it hadn't been focused enough. Now the Twisted Method is a very focused process. So if you hire me for an hour, I take you through all of it, every single bit of it, step by step. So that's what the time did for me.
I want to ask you, because of something you just said. First of all, clearly we don't need grit because there's no G in Twisted. So that isn't even relevant. But what you said was, you don't necessarily have to have grit if somebody else has it. If you're working with somebody else, that has grit.
Yes.
And
and I should say in my world, that the T for tenacity replaces that.
Right.
So that's what it is. So you have a band. Let's say you have a band. Say you have a company.
Sure.
So okay. So tenacity. You have to be willing to go. So what is the whole point of a partnership? And a partnership is a collection of strong points by a group of people that hopefully get you somewhere.
Right.
There's a cliche that I've heard recently that I like, and it says, if you want to go fast, go solo, but if you want to go far, do it together.
Right.
And
and that's actually something that I've got your book here. And that was one of the.
I believe in that. So what I describe in the book is that is that the wisdom of understanding that format, the tenacity to overcome the problems and to continue on, the wisdom of being able to anticipate the problems that you got coming is important.
Yeah.
The inspiration is the fuel that drives you when you have no money. But think about this: when you got no money, all you have is the desire, and that's the inspiration.
Yeah.
So hopefully money comes in and takes over after your inspiration runs out, because inspiration is like a fuel tank. You only have so much of it. Stability. Now, this is the important part. Okay, this is really the important part of the S of stability, especially when it involves a rock band. And I think you'll appreciate this. There's a quote from Duke Ellington in the book, and Duke Ellington says that, and this is, by the way, from like 1930 or 1940. I found a quote from Duke Ellington, and I almost fell off my chair.
Yeah.
And the quote was, "To keep a band together, you need a gimmick. My gimmick was to pay the musicians." And I'm thinking, now here's a guy with an orchestra with 35 guys, right?
Yeah.
He's got to keep them up. Well, I'm in a rock band. What happens with rock bands? The biggest problem with young rock bands is that Joe's got to work in the day. Freddie's got his kid. Like there's all these things that take you away from being the band and devoting yourself 100%. So you need to create a stability. So I looked at all the guys in the band and I said, what does it take? What do you need to make this the singular focus of the band? So that I don't have to worry about you having to pay your rent and this and that and the other. And we determined what those requirements were. And we set up to make sure those requirements were met. And that's how come there was stability. So the point being is that not everybody in the band may have that genius, but they have the participation and ability to work as partners to keep the thing going, because you can't have 5 leaders. You just can't. But you have to have people who are dedicated enough to spend their life with you. So what do you have? Mark Mendoza, Eddie Ojeda, AJ Pirro, amongst many drummers, had to trust, and trust is another big, it's the other T, had to trust me and D. They had to trust that D was going to be creative enough to take us there. They had to trust me to create a business environment that was going to be solid enough to get you there. And I got news for you. Most people don't think bands think along these terms. They think it's like sex, drugs, rock and roll, fairy dust. You make a deal with the devil and you become famous.
Right.
That's not the case. I'll bet you ask Gene and Paul, and they'll tell you exactly what I just said. I'll bet you if you ask, if you would ask the guys in Aerosmith, the same thing. I mean, that's how you survive in this business. You have to create a format, and you have to have the kind of people that will dedicate themselves. So you know what? The best thing about my partners is that they were willing to trust us enough to let us take them on the journey while they were good enough to do it. Because Eddie is a great guitar player. Mark is a phenomenal bass player. And we went through a lot of problems with drummers. As you know in the book, we ran a straight band. We did not tolerate drug and alcohol use. Now, imagine trying to hire someone to be in a band, telling them that we're not into drugs and alcohol. You kind of like limit your amount of people in the pool, don't you?
Yeah.
Because everybody joins a band because they want to party, or they think, that's where it's at. So you get 1 or 2 people who audition for you. You either get a liar who's telling you he doesn't do drugs and alcohol, but he does, and he'll screw up soon enough to expose himself. Or you get a guy who'll say, find someone else. That's not me, because I can't do that. I'm joining you because I want all the chicks, which is fine, but I also want to party out, and that doesn't work. So you need people dedicated to that vision. And when it comes to the vision part of it, the ability for people to trust you, there's a story about Mick Jagger and Keith Richards that I heard, and I love the story. So someone said to Keith Richards, "What's the difference between you and Mick Jagger?" And he says, "Well, Mick gets up every morning and says, what am I doing today? What am I doing in 10 days from now, 10 weeks from now, 10 months from now, 10 years from now?" Keith says, "I get up every morning and go, I got up this morning." That's what Keith says, right? So you kind of like need both of those kinds of things to make it happen. So that's really what it's about. So when people say to me, "What's the most important letter in the bunch?" I'll say tenacity, because if you don't have the ability to stick through this crap, then you shouldn't be in the entertainment. You just shouldn't be an entrepreneur, man.
Right.
You shouldn't be, because this is a tough business, man.
And that was one of the things that you've seen partnership repeatedly in the last couple of minutes, and that was the part that really jumped out at me, having been in a band for a long time, is in the wisdom section. And you've talked about this with D and how you guys kind of operated with each other. You said most people don't want to admit that anybody else deserves the credit but them. But I've always been a team player. I've always believed in partnerships. I don't go it alone. I never have. Even before I became a rock star, I had the wisdom to understand the importance of collaboration.
Yeah. And that was justified by a quote from Ahmet Ertegun, which I say in the book. The chairman of Atlantic Records, one of the most famous record people in the world.
Yeah. Signed Ray Charles, right?
And oh God, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, Aretha, Ray Charles,
right.
John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, AC/DC, Joe Rolling Stone, Led Zeppelin, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I mean, let's just go on and on. And
sure.
And when I finally had time to spend with him, a couple of things he said to me was, when I said, how do you run how could you sign all those different acts? How do you hear all that? And he goes, I don't. He goes, I can't possibly. If I had a label based on the people I love, I'd be broke. I had to bring people into my company who I trusted, who could hear things, because I didn't hear them. And that's me. I don't write. I don't sing. I play guitar. Yeah. And I see, and I have a vision, but I don't do those other things. And so I need D. I need someone like D. I'm a good guitar player, but I need a guitar player like Eddie, because he's rock solid and steady. Like, he can do it. I need Mark Mendoza because he's just, an unbelievable. I mean, I need those guys. That's one thing Ahmet said to me. The other thing he said to me, which is the one that's the most difficult one for people to accept, especially in bands, because jealousy and narcissism run rampant in this business. He said, success is easier if you don't mind who gets the credit.
Yeah.
Man, that's one hell of a statement.
Oh, yeah.
That is one hell of a statement, because you know why? If D didn't write these songs, you wouldn't be having me on your show, and I wouldn't have a book, and I wouldn't have 37 gold and platinum records behind me. Okay? I wouldn't. So I'm not so dumb as I don't acknowledge that. And I'm not telling other bands that they may not have real problems and they may have real issues. And because, bands are like marriages, and no one really knows the truth of what goes on except the people who are involved in it. But for me, no, I always was aware of all of these issues, and I will say that, I do get into the book about my past prior to Twisted. And prior to Twisted, for 5 years, as I describe in the book, I was a street hustler in New York City and a drug dealer here and in Europe. And to be 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old and be on the street and in New York City, mind you, and dealing and being a drug addict and finding yourself in crazy situations where you're almost murdered on a number of occasions, almost shot, stabbed in elevators and bad neighborhoods, and being busted by the police and talking your way out of a couple of drug busts. I mean, you have to tap dance. It's like tap dancing through hell. I tap danced through hell. So I had a certain confidence that I could tap dance through hell by virtue of the fact that I grew up in New York. I mean, New York is a tough place to grow up in. It's a tough street scene. And add to that the time, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71. This was the hippie bullseye period of the world. This was the drug bullseye period. This was the political bullseye period. We were confronted with riots. We were confronted with politics, anti-war. There's so much going on. And I could say to you, it's funny. I played in a band. I was dealing drugs. I was going to school. I was involved in anti-war activities. I was multitasking. I don't know what else they call it, but so then what happens? I walk away from all of it. I wake up one morning, and I go, "Whoa, you're going to die if you keep this lifestyle." And I completely turn around 180, and become the straightest guy in the world. Like the straightest guy in the world. And I hate drugs and I hate alcohol. And I can't operate with people who get fucked up because they're destroying my life, because their stupidity is affecting my life.
Right.
And then I find D. I say to D, I don't drink. He goes, I fucking hate drugs. And you're my guy. You may be crazy in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But if you believe that, you're my guy. And Mendoza, I fucking hate drugs now. I go, wow, how am I so lucky to get these guys this talented? So when you get guys like that and you have fights with them, you have to remember where you're going to find people with that much talent. In other ways. D is the hardest working fucking front man, and I've seen them all. I've played with them all. It don't come close to how good he is. Mendoza and AJ, the rhythm section, no band comes close. This is my opinion. No band comes close. Eddie Ojeda, in terms of his ability to deliver every night, perfect every night, no one comes close. So when you get the cliche that football, that athletes say what happens between the lines is all that matters, what happens between the lines. When you're standing on stage in front of 100,000 people and a promoter's paying you a ton of money to entertain 100,000 people closing a gigantic festival, do you know what kind of pressure that is? Do you know how many bands can you list that can headline 100,000 people arenas? You probably one hand or two hands. Okay. Maybe that's it. Well, we're one of those bands.
Right.
We're one of them. How did we get so good? I tell you in the book how we got so good. You could hate my band. You could hate Twisted Sister all you want. There's two things you can't take away from us. Number one, the songs that we have are just gigantically huge international anthems. Sorry, you don't like them. Too bad. They're there, and they will continue to be there.
Yeah.
Number two, that we headline these massive festivals with the biggest bands in the world, and we close the show almost all the time because most bands don't want to follow us. I understand that because our fans get crazy and they start singing our songs in the middle of other bands' sets, which got to suck for those other bands. That's really it doesn't matter what band it is, because you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm not talking about blowing anyone away, because here's my attitude as a pro. If you're great, blow us away. Knock yourself out. Have at it. We're not going to take away the lights from you, the sound from you. You get on that stage and you kick our ass, because if you kick our ass, you've made that night better for the people. That's what you
know what? I've got I think a lot of people would be really surprised at some of the people that are Twisted Sister fans. And I know that we probably need to acknowledge our sponsors for a second, but when we come back,
let's do that. Yep.
When we come back, I have a message for you from one of your fans, and then I want you to tell us the story behind it.
And I want to get into a little bit with JJ about those greatest stages they stepped on too at the same time. And also Feel Appeal, Love is for Suckers Extra. And also, if people don't already have it, where they can go get the book. We'll talk more about that coming back here. It's the Backstage Pass. It's Bangtail Whiskey. It's MitchMacs.com. And of course, our good friends over at Hank Jr. Productions coming back with the great JJ French here on the Backstage Pass. Stay tuned.
The Bangtail pour is comprised of a sweet corn mash base. The front has a subtle sweetness and not too sharp. It has notes of a medium char or white oak for a smoky flavor in the middle, and the tail has a super smooth and warm finish.
Behind the scenes with some of the biggest artists in music today with the Backstage Pass, powered by the SportsGuysPodcast.com. Join Brandon Morrill and his co-host Kirsty Krause, Jeff McMahon, and Karen Lee Batten as they talk to rising stars and legends about their music careers. Listen to their latest tracks and learn fun facts about the men and women behind the music you love. And be sure to tune into the Backstage Pass Monday through Friday from 3:30 to 6:30, powered by the SportsGuysPodcast.com. And welcome into the Backstage Pass. And back here on the show again, the great JJ French, our guest today for a Tuesday. Hard to believe it's almost the middle of February as we get ready for CRS in Nashville, Tennessee. Myself, Jeff, and Kirsty, looking forward to that. Just Shenandoah is going to join us, Craig Campbell, and a whole lot more. So those 3 days are going to be pretty awesome in Music City there. Don't forget, coming up Thursday this week, we're back to talk some country music with the great John Michael Montgomery here on the Backstage Pass, the Icon, and, of course, just more good stuff coming up. Friday, the artist known as Fillmore will join us here on the show, too, as well. I know you got a great question coming up here, but I do want to ask JJ about the album, which I thought was really awesome, which is Feel Appeal, Love is for Suckers Extra, which is out there across all the digital platforms. Tell me about the selection of music, JJ, and a pretty cool project to work on. 4 great songs, a great selection of songs, and a lot of cool things went into this EP. Tell me about it.
That EP was a creation of our record label, essentially, to promote, I believe, songs that had not really been exploited on the original album. And that album was problematic for us because we were breaking up during the recording of that album. So if you were to ask the band, what is the least played album the band plays, is probably Love is for Suckers. However, I think it's a great sounding record. And because the memories around it were not great, it's like watching the Beatles movie Let It Be and then talking, and then how the memory of it wasn't great for them. In hindsight, you can change your mind about how you view it. You know, it takes time to view it. Because we were having real problems back in those days, we did these extra tracks, and then most of the people forgot the extra tracks were on the record because the band split almost right after that album. And the album came out, and we did a small tour, and that was the end of it. So but they're all good songs. Dee's a great songwriter. So AJ is not on the record. Joe Franco was filled in for AJ. AJ quit after Come Out and Play. There were just extra tracks, and so they exploited it. So I got to listen. My record label does strange things. Most people don't even understand how record labels function. Record labels own these masters. And like it or not, Taylor Swift notwithstanding, you're crying about the fact that you're a slave. We're all slaves. Welcome to the fucking club. Like, the Beatles, the Stones, who's Zeb, Floyd, we're all slaves. The record business it is what it is. And until it's changed fundamentally, it's going to be what it is, which is these people own the masters in perpetuity. And it's the only business in the world where someone else owns what you created and you pay them back for it and you still don't own it. Okay. So I can't even tell you the logic that goes into the unbelievably tragic realities of the record business. It doesn't change for just about anybody, notwithstanding Taylor and a couple of the big catalogs that you hear about being sold, which is another complicated issue to try to explain to the average rank and file person. But labels get this product, and what do? They package it, repackage it. Now, if you don't care enough about you, they don't bother it because they figure, well, nobody cares. But Twisted's popularity has increased so dramatically over the past 5 years that in every way they're trying to figure out ways to do it. And because we're not giving them new things,
right?
They're taking up old things and packaging old things up, which, by the way, I have no problem with because I get paid my royalties. But I'm also in the business of creating packaging. For example, this just came out this week.
Nice.
Oh, okay. This is my creation. What this is, vinyl's big these days. Vinyl's huge.
Yep.
Right.
No one could have ever figured that. Again, nobody could have figured that vinyl would be huge. That nobody could have figured that no one buys CDs anymore. 15 years ago, you just say to me, what's going to be the biggest music there? I'd say CDs. Well, someone would say they're not going to be around in 15 years. They're going to be buying vinyl or downloading and streaming. I'd go, what is that? I don't even know what the hell that is. And so it shows you how much things have changed. But because vinyl's so big, this is a double album. This is 2 vinyl albums, greatest hits live and studio. So you've got all the standard hits on one side and on one album, and on the other side it's some of the best live tracks ever recorded, mostly in England, because some of the best live recordings we've done are in English locations like Hammersmith and Astoria, the Marquee. These are famous locations in England. So this was a creation that I suggested, and now we're working on stuff for next year because next year is the 50th anniversary.
Wow.
So we're going back trying to figure out what can we do, because most of these things that you just mentioned, those tracks, for example, those are officially recorded tracks. Well, then where's the demos? Well, you have to try to find demos. You find out how much they love you to find demos. Well, I've gone even further. I have researched and found hundreds of tracks of cover material that we recorded because we were a cover band, back in the 70s. Van Halen, Judas Priest, AC/DC. I've got tons of it. I've got D doing a Zet medley. We hired D because he could sing Robert Plant perfectly.
Right.
In 1976, we hired him. Well, we have a recording of us doing Good Times, Bad Times, How Many More Times, and Communications Breakdown. They'll blow you away. And they're not perfectly recorded. They're kind of on 2-track off a board. That's going to wind up hopefully coming up with the next anniversary package. So that's really what the issue is. So my record label did this thing that you've just described, which they didn't tell me because they don't have to tell me. I'm glad they did this, and it's digital, so it's not physical. So it's not like they had to come to me and get photos approved. So if they package something in a digital format and called it, what do they? Please tell me, Brandon. What is this thing? What is this titled thing that you are referring to?
The title for that particular streaming for that record, I just say "Feel Appeal, Love Is for Suckers Extras" EP. Okay,
so that's it. So you see, that's what they did. They just decided to take tracks that were not necessarily main tracks. The single was Hot Love. The favorite track to the band is Wake Up the Sleeping Giant from that album, which we played live when the band performed. We also did Hot Love. I mean, we played a bunch of songs on the final tour from that record, but that record was the least referenced album. Again, it's like asking a Beatle fan, what's the most played Beatle album? What's the least played Beatle album? The most played will always be Sgt. Pepper or Revolver, and the least played is always Let It Be. It just is. It just is. And for whatever reason, in the pecking order of people's heads, well, I'm sure if you ask a Motley Crue fan, a Bon Jovi fan, a Judas Priest fan, they're going to give you a plus and a minus. The most played record of their catalog and the least played record of their catalog. And that just so happens in our head, Love Is for Suckers, it comprises the least played for me because the energy that went into Under the Blade, Can't Stop Rock and Roll, and Stay Hungry was the heat source of the band. That was it. Those, and of course, Come Out and Play was a bizarre record because it ends, because we have Leader of the Pack, which was probably the biggest mistake we ever made. And people talk to me about it. What's the biggest mistake you ever made? The biggest mistake wasn't recording it. The biggest mistake was focusing on it and making it a single. It just should have been a track on the record. What should have been was Fire Still Burns. If Fire Still Burns had been the lead track, it would have been looked on as a heavy band. But MTV managed to change the focus of the band and make us more of a sideshow circus routine than a strict metal band. And our response to that in the long term, it was the last 10 years we stopped wearing makeup completely, just T-shirts and jeans, because our attitude was, you either love us or you don't love us. I don't want the makeup to get in the way of liking the band. You either like what the band does or not. And when we start playing these gigantic festivals in Europe, we had to guarantee that we could just blow everybody's mind. And when we stopped wearing all that stuff, nobody cared. And so we moved on. But I think if you look at most of the quote glam bands, the Poisons, the Motleys, the Rats, nobody looks like that anymore. I mean, they just don't. Everyone kind of looks like bikers these days. Because you got to be 140 pounds and 20 to look. You want to be cute, We ain't that anymore, None of us are. So
you're too hard on yourself, JJ.
So he looks good. He looks good. He said he's almost 70. You look good, JJ. You look good.
Enough ibuprofen to have me looking like a middle-aged transvestite.
Yeah.
You know what our motto is, Brandon? Sex, prescription drugs, and rock and roll, babe.
Except we don't do the drugs. You don't do the drugs and alcohol anymore. He's like, we don't need band members that do that. We've got them here in Twisted Sister. They don't do that kind of stuff. Hey, before I do rapid fire, Jeff, what you got? I know one final question. We'll do a couple of rapid fire questions.
Well, yeah, I was noting that it's so funny. I toured in the country market, and I know that a lot of times people would say, "Oh, well, do you know music other than Tim McGraw music? Like, yeah, I listen to a lot of stuff. It's funny how people think only metal guys only listen to metal and country people only listen to country. Well, I got a little thing for you here from a fan of yours, and you can tell us what the story is behind it. Here we go. Is it? Yeah, there it is.
Hey there, John Carter Cash here, coming from Hendersonville, Tennessee. This is the Cash Cabin Studio. So I remember when I was a boy, 13, 14 years old, I was a metalhead, my hair all the way back down to the middle of my butt. And I asked my father, please, can we go see a rock and roll show? And I had the chance to go backstage and meet Twisted Sister. Twisted Sister forever. I remember that day very clearly. Remember meeting the guys, meeting JJ. And I want to reach out and say, hey, and thank you so much. I still have that autograph. And I went looking for it this morning when I found out I was going to get to make this video, but I wasn't able to find it real quick. If I find it, I'll send you a picture of it. Anyway, blessings to you and thank you for the great memories, and Twisted Sister still forever.
Okay, are you ready for this? Here's the picture of Johnny Cash coming to get John the autograph for John.
Wow.
There it is.
That's awesome.
Okay, there it is. And by the way, I was about to send John Carter Cash an email because I want to have him on my show. Okay, so there is the picture, ladies and gentlemen, when Johnny Cash came to get Twisted Sister's autograph for his son, John Jr.
That's awesome.
And that is one of my greatest favorite stories that I tell about the. May I tell it, or do we have a time?
Go ahead. We got time. Go ahead.
Okay.
We got time.
So we're in Toronto, Canada, with Iron Maiden, playing at the Maple Leaf Gardens. And I'm sitting on a Zamboni machine outside of the dressing room because that's what you do. There's Zamboni machines because they're hockey arenas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm hanging on a Zamboni machine talking to some crew guy, and all of a sudden I hear this voice, and he goes, you all know where I can find Twisted Sister? And I went, fuck, that sounds just like Johnny Cash. And I look up and it's Johnny Cash. I'm like, what are you doing here? He goes, I said, that's me. He goes, well, I came to get my autograph for my son, John Jr. He goes, and I brought a photographer to take a picture of it to prove that I met you. I went, you're kidding, right? I mean, you got to bring a photographer up for that, you know? So I run into the dressing room. I said, guess who's out there? Johnny Cash. And they're going, yeah, right. Johnny Cash is in Toronto, Canada to get a autograph from us for his kid. And I made some statement like $1,000, motherfucker. Okay, $1,000. Let's bet right now. And Mendoza goes, well, Johnny wouldn't bet $1,000 unless it was.
Yeah.
So I bring Johnny in, and we're like, I didn't even know what to say. We're like, you sure you want to? He goes, I need your autograph for my son. I need your. So we you know, so there it is. So there we are, you know. So we're there we go. So there's so we take a picture of it. There's the picture, and I'm going like, so I say to him. So he says to me, you'll be guys playing Nashville, and I said, yeah, we're playing Nashville. I don't know, like 2 or 3 months. He goes, you'll look me up, you know, when you get down there. So we're in Nashville, and I'm at the Hilton, and I think it was, I don't remember what it was, and I said, I called the front desk, and I said, how do I get Johnny Cash's phone number? I figure everybody knows in Nashville, right? And they give me a phone number for the House of Cash, which was his museum, but I didn't know. So a woman answered, House of Cash. And I said, is this House of Cash as in a bank, or is this House of Cash as in, I thought it was a loan to, I thought for sure it couldn't be the Johnny Cash thing.
Right.
She goes, it's Johnny Cash. I said, is he there? She goes, he don't live here. It's a museum. Well, that was his mother.
Okay.
She was managing it at the time.
Yeah.
So I said, well, listen, this is JJ French from the band Twisted Sister. You probably don't know who we are, but Johnny said if we come to Nashville, let him know. So you think you're going to see him? She says, well, I don't know. You know, I'll let him know if I hear from him. So I said, well, I'm at the Hilton and the phone number is blah, the room number is blah. And the next morning the phone rings at 8 a.m. I think it's my wife, so I just pick up the phone and go, hi, how you doing? And I hear, hi, JJ, it's Johnny Cash. I almost fall off the freaking bed. I'm like, that voice is just that voice. I have to tell you.
Oh,
that voice is just that freaking voice. So that night he said, can you put me and Waylon on the guest list? I'll never forget that. And I went, of course I will. But I'm thinking, don't you just show up? I mean, you're Johnny and Waylon, right? It's Nashville.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Lemmy at the Marquee in London. I mean, you have to show your ID. I wouldn't think you would necessarily have to, but what the hell do I know?
Right.
So the whole Carter family came down. John
That's
Jr., June, everybody, and they invited us to their house for lunch the next day. But we had to go because we're on the maiden tour, so we never did it. So I have always been telling that story, thinking to myself, man, I got to find John Carter Cash and get him on my show. And I just was going over. I did the show called Chris and Sandy. Do you know who they are? The Chris and Sandy show.
Yeah, I know who they are.
So they said, oh, yeah, we had John Carter Cash on our show. I said, man, can you give me a contact information? And they just emailed it to me a couple of hours ago, guys. You realize like how this is for me? And you guys spring John Carter Cash on me. Well, I'm going to contact John Carter Cash and get him on my show because this is like and I was going over these photos today and I said, I wonder if these guys are going to bring this up. And bingo, there it is, man. There it is.
Hey, I'm here in Nashville, man. We all talk to each other.
Yeah.
Nashville's one of my favorite towns.
Well, come on.
And well, I was down there in October and I hadn't been there in 3 years. And oh my God, what happened in 3 years in Nashville? I mean, forget about 20 years. Let's talk about 3 years. I mean, here I am. I'm staying on what's that weirdly named street that starts with a D?
DeMontbrewen.
Yeah, DeMontbrewen, right. So
yeah.
I'm staying at a friend's apartment up the hill where ASCAP is, where the ASCAP building is, where the Virgin Hotel is. Yeah,
by the circle, yeah.
I'm staying up there, right? And we walk down Broadway, and I'm looking at these buildings that were not there 3 years ago, these monster towers. Gruen's gone. There's that huge mall. Man, the transformation. My guitar player moved down in Nashville.
Yeah.
And do you know Steve Dean, the country writer Steve Dean?
Yeah, I know Steve.
Steve is one of my best friends.
Yeah.
And we write country songs together. It's like one of my side things is I write these country songs. So I said to him, I'm writing a song called You're Not Allowed to Suck in Nashville. Because every musician I ever hear in Nashville is a motherfucker. You can walk into Roberts on any day of the week, and there's some like 21-year-old kid on a Telecaster who's Brad Paisley's kid, And,
sure.
They're amazing. You really, I'm telling you, man, you're not allowed to suck in Nashville. I think if you suck, they shoot you out back or something. Because every bar I ever walk into in Nashville has the greatest players in the world I've ever heard. And then nobody's ever heard of.
Yep. Oh yeah, they're everywhere.
Oh man, Roberts.
But there's also a bunch that stink too.
Yeah, well, I like to sit at Roberts with my bologna sandwich and my root beer and listen to some ridiculous musicians at Roberts. I love Nashville, but man, you guys are undergoing one hell of a change. How do you preserve history of Nashville with that?
That's the expense of growth, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, it's an amazing. I tell people, it's an amazing, absolutely amazing town. And me and my wife, that's our favorite city in the United States, outside of New York City. So I love Nashville.
I love New York too.
So can I tell you about, you're in Beaumont, right? You're in
Beaumont, Texas. Yes, sir.
So real quick, when Twisted did its crazy first tour in America, driving around in rent-a-cars because we had no tour support. Okay. We finished up playing in LA, and then our agent said you got a show in Salt Lake City. So we drove from LA to Salt Lake City. We're in rent-a-cars, mind you, right? And then he says, I got you 3 dates in Texas, Houston, Beaumont, and Austin at the Cardi's chain. Do you remember the Cardi's?
Cardi's chain.
Cardi's was a chain of bars in Texas back in the 80s. Okay.
Yeah. I think I've heard of my parents would tell me about them too.
So we drove 22 hours.
Wow.
And we did Beaumont, Austin, and Houston. And we get to Beaumont, and interestingly enough, we get to Beaumont, and the place is packed with hot chicks. And I said, wow, the thing's finally turned. There's tons of hot chicks. Like, like the place with the parking lot was packed. We pull up, and then I look out, I'm going, whoa, man, place is packed with hot chicks. Well, it turns out it was a male dancer review that opened up for us. And the minute those guys left, so did the guy.
Emptied out.
Gone. It's Beaumont, Texas, I tell you. Hey, let's do a couple of rapid fire questions with JJ here. JJ, I know you've traveled the world. You guys have done it all. When it comes to food, and specifically, I'm a pizza nut. If you're ordering a pizza just for JJ French, what toppings go on it?
Oh man, if you really know your pizza, you don't do anything. You know exactly where to go. Mm-hmm. There's like, the really good places like Spumoni Gardens, in Brooklyn, like, or there's a place where you just let them do what they do. So you can throw all that crap on it. But it's funny you should mention that, because Michael Mina, who has a restaurant in Nashville, by the way, who's an internationally known super celebrity chef, invited me and my wife to go on a pizza tour of New York about 3 months ago for a television show. So we hit some of the best pizza places in Brooklyn and lower Manhattan. We have great pizza in this town. I mean, we really know our pizza. And if you come to New York, I'll blow your mind, and you will never put a topping on again, or you will to cover up the shit that people put on because the stuff isn't great. So there's your answer.
I'll contact you. We'll get in touch and have some pizza. Jeff, a pizza tour 2023. We got to do that.
I'm down. I'm down.
With JJ.
You guys can take me on a barbecue tour. I'm sure. Probably the best brisket on the planet, and I'll kick your ass up here with pizza. That's also cultural exchange, my man.
Hey, real quick on the book availability, tell people where they can get it if they don't have a copy already.
Yeah. So the book, Twisted Business, available on Amazon. That's the easiest way to do it, because Amazon owns the world. Basically, it ends everything.
Sure does.
And
I'll read that from cover to cover when I get a copy.
And it is a bizwar. It's a pretty easy read. My co-writer Steve Farber is a genius. He captured my voice. We tell the right stories. There's a million stories that didn't make the book, because frankly, if every story was in the book, it would be like War and Peace, and it wouldn't make any sense. And that's why I love what Steve did with the book. He really heard me and said, John, shut up. Like, enough. Let's just move on to the next subject. Okay. So it's easy to digest, and it's a great book, not just for the entertainment business, for any business, but especially if you're in the music business, this toxic, fucked up business that we're in, and you want to figure out ways to survive it. I actually give you tools in the book. I explain how we did it, and it's not arbitrary. It's not ambiguous. It's specific things we did. So the best part about the fact that I kept a diary was I was able to go back and look at what we did and realize that we didn't understand what we were doing at the time. It happened organically, but our survival techniques are applicable to everything. So that's why it's
that's great.
Well, I'll tell you what, we appreciate the knowledge, man. Congrats on 50 years next year, 2023 in the industry. Two of the best rock anthems that live on forever. Just all the great success, hanging in there, and survival of the fittest. It describes the JJ French story. I love it. And we appreciate you, man. Looking forward to catching up hopefully in 2023 with the 50th anniversary, the vinyl records, all the projects. And brother, it's been a blast chatting with you today, and hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you for making this a really magical talk. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Got it. The one and only JJ French, Twisted Sister. Go check him out on Amazon. Get the book, Twisted Business. We'll see you guys tomorrow with Crystal Bowersox on the show. And then Thursday, Jeff and I looking forward to talking to country music icon John Michael Montgomery here on the show. Looking forward to that. We'll see you guys at CRS here in a couple of weeks, February 23rd to 25th in Nashville at the Omni. Until then, have a great night.